Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to be ranking every item that you can get in tier 4 content for your rogue and get you an idea of how valuable each item is and what items you should focus on getting first, whether you're spending your DKP or planning a loot list for your rogue. So I won't be going into super detail on every single item and how it compares to other options available. But if you want the detailed, tier 4 breakdown, I will have a link to my YouTube video on tier 4 best in slot in the description below. But now into the ranked tier list, starting with the top tier, and that is going to be Dragon Spine Trophy. Now this is the single best item that you can get in tier 4. It's not even close. It's best in slot the entire game, and it's a big immediate upgrade. The only thing I will mention about this trinket is that it is going to have a ton of competition, so just be prepared for that. Moving past that, the best sword you can get from raiding is Spike Blade in tier 4. You're going to definitely want to get Spike Blade unless you have Dragon Maw or Blink Strike. Dragon Maw does a little bit more damage according to the Simon spreadsheet, and Blink Strike does about the same damage as Spike Blade. So if you have one of these two weapons, you can pass on Spike Blade, or if you indeed have a Gladiator sword. But besides that, Spike Blade is going to be really good and definitely a major focus of any sword rogue. I did also want to mention Malkazine. Malkazine is the best in slot dagger for rogues in tier 4 for your main hand. Moving past that, the next items that you're going to want to focus on are going to be items that have value in tier 5. The best one of those is the boots, and the reason is because they are best in slot not only in tier 4, but also in tier 5. Now in tier 4, they're a pretty big upgrade over the next best pair of boots, but even in tier 5, the only thing that comes close is a pair of leatherworking boots that you have to actually be a leather worker to use as well. So definitely a really good pair of boots, one of the best items in tier 4. Onwards to the cloak. Now the cloak from Shade of Iran is going to be best in slot in tier 4 and almost best in slot in tier 5. It's about the same as the tier 5 cloak, so you can continue using this cloak even in tier 5 and you'll barely lose any damage. So that's one of the reasons why this is one of the best items. The other reason why is because it is going to be a decent bit better than every other cloak option that you can get up to this point. Now on to the decent best in slot items. You've got Skulker's Greaves and you've got some rings. So Skulker's Greaves is going to be a really good item because it is best in slot in tier 4. It's going to be best in slot as long as you don't have Terror Weave Tunic. If you do get this world boss item, it is going to shift your configuration a little bit. But for most people, Skulker's Greaves are going to be best in slot. And in tier 5, they're individually best in slot too. So you would only really need to replace them once you've got your Death Mantle set bonuses lined up, and then you can eventually get the legs. So it is going to be an item that you can hang on to for quite a while and delay getting your tier 5 legs. With that said, there's other good options like the rings, and the rings are going to be not necessarily the quickest thing to replace in tier 5 either, because a lot of people are going to want the best tier 5 rings. So both the Garona Signet and the Ring of Thousand Marks are definitely valuable items to pick up as well. They're best in slot in tier 4, and they're about equal. There's really not much difference between the two items. If you had to pick one that you wanted to get first, Garona's Signet Ring technically is a little bit better for PvP, but obviously they drop from different bosses, and maybe that would influence your decision as well. But they're about the same, and all three of these items are decent best in slot items for you to get for your rogue. Moving past that, we have the best pieces of tier. The best one is definitely the chest. You're going to want to incorporate that so long as you do not have the Terror Weave Tunic from World Boss. It individually is a very good item, and you're going to want to pick up the chest as you're gearing up. The helmet's a little different story. Individually, it is not best in slot. And there's even a badge head that is slightly better than it in terms of individual damage. But it is overall best in slot when you consider the 2-set bonus. So when you are able to complete the 2-set bonus, you are going to want to pick up the helmet, and but you don't necessarily have to rush to complete the helmet because it's not super amazing until you have that 2-set. One nice thing about getting the helmet, though, is that you're able to put the meta socket in it, and that can be nice. That way you don't have to feel like you have to put a meta socket in a helmet that is less valuable. Moving past that, I did want to mention the bow. This is going to go to hunters first, and it's not a big upgrade for you, but it is technically best in slot and something you would look to get eventually, and it is better than the marksman's bow and the veteran's musket. Now, that is the end of the best in slot gear from Tier 4. From this point onward, we're going to be looking at items that are not best in slot, but they are going to be items that do have some value, specifically if there aren't other classes that also want the items. So in some cases, like the Grips of Deafness, I wouldn't really recommend getting these, even though they are close to best in slot. I can't recommend getting them because there are other classes that would benefit so much more than you, and you can get something outside of raid that is just going to be better. And since this is the raid priority list, and the goal is for you to get the most out of your DKP or the most out of your loot list, it would be kind of foolish to waste precious DKP on an item that is worse than something you can get from, for example, a dungeon. So some of these items, like the Netherblade Breeches, it just might come to a point where, hey, nobody needs the leg token anymore, and you just pick it up and use it temporarily until you can get the Skulker's Greaves. Or you could shift your gearing and just use the Netherblade Reaches and maybe swap out your helmet for a different helmet and just lose out on a little bit of damage. If something like the Skulker's Greaves, are contested by other classes that really want it. So, there's going to be some items like the legs and the head that you might shift your gear around a little bit for, but ultimately some of these items like the Steelhawk crossbow or the Wolf Slayer's sniper rifle, these aren't really items that you're going to use long term. It might just be something that you use temporarily. So like I previously mentioned, both of these helmets are actually individually better than the Tier 4 helmet, but with the set bonus, you're going to want to use the Tier 4 helmet. The legs are just barely worse than Skulker's Greaves, but they are going to be, not necessarily in that best in slot unless you have the Terror Weave Tunic. If you do have the Terror Weave Tunic, you are going to use the legs. Moving past that, you've got the belt from Gruul, which is worse than a heroic dungeon belt, the Girdle of the Death Dealer, but nonetheless, still the second best option. Definitely something you can use as a temporarily placeholder. You also have the bladed shoulder pads. These are individually the best shoulders, but again, you've probably heard this a few different times now. Because of the Waste Walker set bonus this time, you're not actually going to want to use this item once you achieve the Waste Walker 2 set with shoulders and gloves. Same reason for these gloves, because again, you want the Waste Walker gloves. Romulo's Poison Vial. Now, this is a really interesting item because it is almost best in the slot. It's actually really good. It's barely, it does about as much damage as the Bloodlust Brooch, which is going to be your best in slot trinket that you pair with your DST if you can get your hands on it. But the one thing about Romulo's Poison Vial that's a little weird is it has 35 hit rating on it. And in TBC, as a rogue, you're actually going to get so much hit rating that you can hit the cap where you don't want any more hit rating. And Romulo's Poison Vial actually can make it so that you get too much hit. And I know that seems weird because hit's really good for rogues. But essentially what that means is early on, if you're like a fresh 70, Romulo's Poison Vial is actually really good. And definitely something worth picking up if no one wants. But later on, it's not as good. And if you're almost best in slot, it's actually going to be hard to use this item without having to mess up all your gems, because you're probably going to have some hit gems on all your gear. And if you add in 35 hit rating, which is a ton, all of a sudden you might be 35 hit rating more than you want, and you might have to switch out a bunch of gems. So almost too much hit to make your gear set work. But otherwise, a good item. You also have the Worgen Claw necklace. This is worse than the badge necklace, the Choker of Vile Intent, but just barely. You've got the chest guard of the Carnivorous, again, worse than the tier 4 chest, but hey, if you don't have tier 4 chest yet, nobody wants this, you can pick this up for sure. The ranged weapons, these are not super great and worse than even the reputation weapons, but same thing that I've been saying before. There's only 10 people in Karazhan. It's not that unlikely that some of these items are going to drop and no one's going to need them, and you can use them as you're gearing up your character. It's not that out of the question that you get a bow like this or a gun like this before you are exalted with honor hold, and it can be valuable temporarily. Now on to the next tier. These are items that I wouldn't really. Again, I wouldn't prioritize the close to best in slot items at all, and I would make sure that if it's best in slot for a different class, that they get it. And that's kind of the same thing with the tier. If no one wants these tier pieces, you can take them, I guess. But for the same reason you're not going to be interested in the shoulders and gloves because you're going to use Waste Walker, it's the same reason here. You don't really want this tier gear for raiding, and this will be something you just maybe eventually pick up if no one wants to, for completionism for your set, but definitely not items that you would want to focus on early. After that, we have temporary items. Now, these are significantly worse than the close to Abyss items. These are all basically really bad. They're really terrible. And it just might so happen that if you're a fresh 70, some of these items are going to be better than some of the things you have, but they are so bad that I wouldn't even consider wasting any significant amount of DKP. I wouldn't take any of these items if it would affect any of your priority on something else, because they just are all really bad. And especially if some other class wants something like this, just let them have it. Because, for example, these Rapscallion boots, there's a lot of blue quest boots that you can just do a quest chain and get a better pair of boots. The Cloak of the Pit Stalker, there's multiple blue cloaks that you can just get from dungeons or just even quests that are better. The gloves of dexterous manipulation, they're worse than fell leather gloves that you can just buy. And, not even, they're fourth bis and worse individually than a BOE blue that you can pick up. So, only use these items, again, if it's better than what you have. And I have, again, check in the link below if you want to see how this item would stack up relative to all the other tier 4 items, so that if it isn't even an upgrade to begin with. But something like Bracers of Maliciousness, these might look good. They're less damage than green that you can get from a quest. So really, all of these items are pretty bad and something that you would just use temporarily. Shuriken of Negation is especially terrible. It is significantly worse than a green gun called Mama's Insurance. And the only reason I would take this is maybe as a PvP or just a thrown weapon for deadly throw if you don't have one, because it is just really bad. But I thought I would list these items because you're going to see them drop and you might be curious, how good are they? They're not good. Now, I put the weapons down here. I would not rank them below these, but the point is it's kind of hard to rank how good these weapons are unless you know what you're dealing with. So I would again recommend checking out my video on best in slot gearing so that you know how these stack up. All of these weapons are just going to be worse than if you got Blade Fist, Vindicator's Brand, or Dragon Maw, and Blink Strike would be another one. If you have any of those items, it's not even worth getting these. If you are going to go for a dagger as a temporary placeholder, Emerald Ripper is better than Blade of the Unrequited, because Unrequited is a little too fast. If you are going to pick one of these daggers, you should try and get the badge dagger called Searing Sunblade or Felltooth Eviscerator to pair with it. But you're really only going to want to pick up these weapons if someone else doesn't want them, because again, these items are going to be much better for a warrior or an enhancement shaman, and you wouldn't want to take it from them. Because then, that warrior might take your Spite Blade. So just, wouldn't want that to happen. But yeah, you should probably only pick up these items as temporary upgrades, if you've got nothing better, and know that there are some stuff you can get outside raid that will be better. So I wouldn't put too much into these weapons. If you are someone who likes to PvP, you could snipe something like a Fool's Bane if no one wants it, and it will be a decent for you in PvE, a decent placeholder till you can get something like Spikeblade. But otherwise, I wouldn't worry too much about these weapons, as you can just work towards like an Aldor Exalted Sword, and you'll be better off than any of these. One other thing I did want to mention, I know some people might want to try rogue tanking or some sort of rogue shenanigans. And while I would make sure your tanks get the Moro's Lucky Pocket Watch first, if the tanks already have it, you can pick this up for rogue tank shenanigan stuff, because it gives you passive dodge and then on-use dodge as well. So if you want to mess around with that, that's a thing, but make sure the tanks get that first. And then on to these items I labeled ignore. The ring here from the guaranteed quest item from Magtheridon's Lair. You can definitely go for this if you're a PvP player. If you're not, just I would go ahead and ignore the ring. Let other classes get the reward from the Magtheridon turn-in. And all the rest of these items are just, not even worth really looking at. They're just for other classes. So, they're just so bad. You're really probably not going to see these being better than like greens. So, I just wouldn't really worry about these items that just aren't really statted for a rogue. But that is pretty much it. That is all of the gear ranked from tier 4. Let me know what you guys think. What are you going to be focusing on? And I will see you guys in the next video.